In today's video, we are going to cover the top 12 Terraform interview questions and answers for 2025. If you are preparing for DevOps or cloud interview, Terraform is the almost guaranteed to come up. And here's the problem. Most people know a few Terraform commands, but interviewers want to test if you actually understand the fundamentals and real world scenarios. That's why in this video, I divided into 3 levels. First, basic to check your fundamentals. Number 2, real world, day to day, Terraform. And number 3, advanced, the questions that separates from beginners to professionals. Stay till the end because I'll also share some common traps that interviewers love to set and how you can avoid them. And before we start, make sure to subscribe and also check out my 1-hour full Terraform course, link in the description. Alright, let's jump into the basics. Under basic questions, we have what is Terraform and how does it work? Terraform is an open source infrastructure as code tool from HashiCorp. You define your infrastructure in configuration files using HCL, that is HashiCorp's language. Then Terraform compares your config with what's already running, plans the changes, and applies only what's needed. It's declarative. You say what you want, Terraform figures out how to do it. For example, this is how the code looks like. This is HashiCorp configuration language. I am showing these files from my full 1-hour Terraform course. The link is in the description. This is how it looks like. Now let's jump into the second question. Now, second basic question. Explain infrastructure as code. Why use Terraform over other tools? Infrastructure as code means you manage infrastructure using code, the one which I showed just now, instead of manual steps. There are multiple ways to create infrastructure. One is manually, second is using shell scripts, third some other scripts, and fourth Terraform. Why do we need to use Terraform out of all these options? Because we can version control, repeatability, automation, and also Terraform is special because it is cloud agnostic, meaning using Terraform I can deploy to AWS, I can deploy to Azure, I can deploy to Google Cloud, also VMware Cloud, Kubernetes clusters, Docker on-prem, you name it. Comparing to CloudFormation, which is deploying only on AWS, and if we compare with Bicep, it is trying to deploy resources only on Azure Cloud. Whereas, let's say in 1 year or 2 years, your company wants to switch from AWS to Azure, it would be easier for you to deploy. There is no need to learn a separate new tool or technology. You can use Terraform in AWS as well as Azure. Question number 3 under basics. What are providers and resources in Terraform? Providers are plugins that let talk to platform like AWS, Azure, Docker. What are resources? Resources are nothing but the actual objects you create, like EC2 instance, a Docker container, a Kubernetes cluster. These all come under resources. So provider is equal to driver and resource is equal to the car you create. In my full 1 hour Terraform course, I showed you required providers, for example, Docker, and the resource here is, let's say, Docker image and Docker container. These are resources, these are providers. If you are using Azure Cloud, then you'll use Azure RM provider. It's nothing but a plugin which will help you talk to Azure Cloud. Question 4 under basics. What is a Terraform state file? Why is it important? State file is Terraform's memory. It maps your code to real resources. Without state file, Terraform wouldn't know what exists and what to change. That's why teams usually use remote state stored in S3 or Azure Blob with locking mechanism. Let's look at the Terraform state file example. This is terraform.ts state. If you see, we can see different resources, IDs, names of those resources, providers. All that information is, let's say, stored in the Terraform state file. This is how it looks like. Interviewers often ask, what happens if you delete the state file? So for example, let me show you. Terraform apply. I see no changes. Apply complete. Resources 0 added, 0 destroy. So let's say try to delete this file. And let me run Terraform apply once again. Terraform apply. Press enter. If you see, it is trying to recreate those resources because Terraform state file is gone and it is trying to recreate those resources. And it is unable to create because that resource already exists and it cannot recreate, which can be very, very dangerous in production environment. You have to answer in such a way that no one should have access to this Terraform state file. Proper guardrails should be in place. There should be a proper log file. Only admins can access. Now let's go to question number 5. This is intermediate level. What is the difference between Terraform plan and apply? Plan will show you what Terraform would do without making any changes. It will just show you what it is doing. Whereas apply actually creates or updates resources. Best practice, always run plan first especially in CI CD. So there are no surprises. Let's look at the live example now. I'm jumping into my Visual Studio Code. Here I'm going to run Terraform plan. Press enter. If you see, plan 2 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. It is just showing what exactly it is going to do. Whereas Terraform apply will actually create the resources. Enter a value. I'm going to say yes. Enter. It is trying to create those resources for us. That's how Terraform plan and apply works. Question number 6. This is also intermediate level question. How does Terraform handle drift? Drift, when does it happen exactly? When resources are changed outside of Terraform. I'm going to write it here. Outside of Terraform. For example, you delete a container manually, which I'm going to show you now. Terraform state thinks it still exists. But when you run Terraform plan, Terraform notices the drift and recreates the resource to match your configuration. Let's look at that in action so that you'll have clear picture of what I'm trying to say here. So let me show you the example demo. So for example, I will try to run Terraform apply now. It will create two resources. Plan 2 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. Okay, it is trying to create two resources for us. We are using infrastructure as code Terraform here. Apply complete successfully. Two resources added, 0 change, 0 destroy. Okay, once again I will do Terraform apply. It says 0 resources, 0 change, 0 destroy because I did not change anything. I tried to run the second time. That is expected. Now I am going to say docker ps. I can see the container running. I'm going to copy this container ID. Docker stop space container ID. Press enter. So I did this manually, okay, which is outside of this Terraform state file. Now I'm going to clear the screen. If I try to run Terraform apply, what will happen now? It is trying to recreate that instance because it tried to check with the actual resource. It is not present and check with the state file. So it is trying to recreate that. We call this as drift, which is very, very dangerous in production environment. Question number 7. This is also an intermediate level question. What are Terraform modules and why would you use them? Modules are like Lego blocks. Instead of repeating the same code for every environment, for example, development environment, staging, QA, prod, you package into a module and reuse it. I will not create the same code for dev, stage, QA, prod. Instead, I will create one single module, for example, a virtual machine module. That particular module I can use and spin up in all these environments. That's why we create modules so that we don't repeat our code. This keeps your infra clean, consistent, and easy to maintain. You cannot complain saying because we change this file in dev, the same file is, let's say, missing in staging environment, or same configuration, same setting. It can be anything. In production environments, we see different issues, different problems. So if you have, let's say, the same code base, it is easy to handle. Now let's look at live. Here I have IAC modules. In this, I have main.terraform file. Here I wrote resource Docker image, Docker container with variables file as well. Then followed by I have two separate folders. One is production and the second one is QA environment. In this production environment, in my main.terraform file, I am saying source as /modules nginx container. So I'm trying to refer to this path and I am providing the name. If I want, I can provide the image and the port. The same way, if I want to deploy the resource in QA environment, I'm going to use main.terraform once again. In this, I'm saying module nginx1, source is once again pointing to nginx container module, and name is this external port. This is how, let's say, once you write a single module, you can use the same module across different environments. Okay, this is how modules can be, let's say, reusable, repeatable, and also version controlled automation, you can say. Now let's jump into the next question. What is the difference between count and for each? This is also intermediate question. Count is used when you want multiple copies of same resource. Okay, that would be indexed by number 1, 2, 3, something like this. Whereas for each is used when you want to create resources based on a map or a set with meaningful names. Think of count as clones, whereas for each as customized resources. I am going to show you an example. Let's look at the live example now. Resource Docker container count is equal to 3. Image is docker image.nginx.image id, whereas under name nginx basics count.index, followed by external port also 8080 plus count.index. Let me do Terraform apply. Press enter. So it is asking if you want to create these. Yes. Let's look at the resources. So nginx basic 2, nginx basic 1, nginx basic 0. Okay, and if you look at the external ports 8080, 8081, 8082, that's how the count works. It will try to create those resources. Now let's talk about the for each. In for each, for example, dev is equal to 8081, qa 8082, prod is equal to 8083. This is how we define for each. And then in the name each dot key, external is, let's say, each dot value. Then it will try to create those resources accordingly. Count is nothing but quick clones indexed by number, as I said. For each, more flexible, readable names and custom settings per resource. Now let's go to advanced questions. What kind of advanced questions you can expect? What is a remote backend and why use it? A backend is where Terraform stores its state file. Okay, by default it's local, but teams and companies use remote backends like S3 or Azure Blob. Remote backends support state locking and make collaboration possible. Collaboration, that means multiple team members can work. Without it, two engineers could override their changes. So right now We have terraform.state file locally on our machine. I'm showing you everything locally. Whereas in actual project and work environments, this particular state file will sit in a storage account. For example, Azure storage account, which will be remotely. And also, whatever changes you are doing, this is all local right now. Everything is, let's say, automated, and it will be in, let's say, CI/CD pipelines. If there is any need, then you can connect to that backend. But 99% we need to avoid. If there are any dead issues, then only we'll try, let's say, try to connect or import the state file locally and do some changes and all. How does Terraform manage concurrency when multiple people run it? Through state locking. If your backend supports it, Terraform logs the state file while an operation is running, meaning the second person cannot do anything. In AWS, this is done by S3 plus DynamoDB, whereas in Azure, it's done by Blob. Another advanced level question: how do you handle sensitive data in Terraform? Not only in Terraform, in general, you should never hard code secrets. Always use, for example, in Terraform, sensitive is equal to true in variables. Store secrets in vaults, AWS Secret Manager, or Azure Key Vault, and pass them via environment variables or CI/CD pipelines. Remember, tf.state can contain plain secret. So always secure your state file. How do you manage multiple environments in Terraform? Advanced level question. There are three common ways. Number one is workspaces, that is, separate files, state files for dev, stage, prod. Separate directories, one folder per environment. And third, separate backends. That is dev.tf state, for example, prod.tf state. Best practice: separate state files so changes in dev environment don't accidentally affect production environment. Common trick question: can you use one state file for multiple environments? Technically, yes, but it's a bad practice. You risk of mixing resources and breaking isolations. And that's it. The top 12 Terraform interview question and answers for 2025. We started with basics, moved to intermediate, real world use, and finished with advanced concepts like backend, concurrency, and managing environments. If you found this helpful, hit like so more people see it, and make sure to subscribe for weekly DevOps labs and interview prep. And don't forget to check out my full 1 hour Terraform course. That course is hands on and will give you the confidence to not just answer interview questions, but actually apply Terraform in real projects. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.